And because I know where each of you stand, I want to ask you, Kirk, we're going to do point, and then I'm going to have you, Natasha, do the counterpoint. So, Kirk, what do you think is the most compelling one thing that to you said, that's reasonable doubt, there goes the state's case?
I think we go back to the testimony of Major Johnson that we just saw. He was there and he has the expertise. And he's not from an ivory tower. He's not Mr. Stoughton. He's not any other expert. He was there. It was his life. It was his arm that was in the car. He was assessing the heat of the situation. No expert can bring forth that opinion as the way he could. And I think that's the blow that the state cannot recover from.
All right, Natasha. So if that is the blow that the state cannot recover from, do counterpoint, if you would. What evidence did the state present that you feel like is enough to say, nope, beyond a reasonable doubt, she is guilty?
Well, first of all, to respond to him, even though the officer was there, I was speaking as a layperson. If there was a layperson on the jury, a lot of people believe that there's this thing called the blue wall of silence. So even though the officer was present, a lot of people, lay people, still believe that police officers are not going to testify adverse to a fellow officer in any shape, form, or fashion. So the weight of that is not as high as I think he thinks it is. Secondly, the expert testified that it was not reasonable to use a taser, even if she did use a taser. In this instance, she didn't use a taser; she used a gun. So that's my points on that.
Let me ask you, and I wondered why no one asked this question. So let me start with you, Natasha. The state did have an expert who did testify, as you just pointed out, that it was not reasonable that she used deadly force, i.e. the firearm, but it also wasn't reasonable, as you just mentioned, that she used a taser in this circumstance. And so basically, Daunte Wright could have gotten away and then they could have caught him. I kept waiting for that next question of, well, then what is reasonable? Well, is there any other use of force that's reasonable in that scenario? Or do you think the answer is no, you let Daunte Wright, if he chooses to evade arrest, let him do that and then seek him out later?
I did want a little bit more in-depth conversations about questions about the policies and procedures. I'm a policies and procedures girl when it comes to excessive force, because I like to know what options were available, what different scenarios did she have, what options. And in this case, they did not. I don't believe that the state brought that out enough.
I thought the same thing. I mean, just because I'm a self-proclaimed trial nerd, pretty anal about reading everything and knowing what everything says. And I thought too, the policies and procedures, I was left wanting more, that's all. Kirk, let's shift gears then. Again, we're talking about, I know that you stated that you think the state has not proven beyond a reasonable doubt. When it comes to that, so the end of the state's case, the prosecution's presented all these witnesses, and you think that that is what the state has not been able to prove, one of these two charges. How important is it in your mind, the credibility and the blue wall of silence, when it comes to the fact that those testifying as to the reputation for the defense, as to the reputation of Kimberly Potter, are officers? Is that something that is going to weigh with the jury?
Well, I think there's some extent to that. I mean, we saw after the Chauvin conviction, I think, a sea change of how people view cops. But at the same time, I think, people do tend to give a deference to police officers. I think it's still there. They're people that we respect. They're doing tough jobs. And so I think that, we ask jurors when they come in to make sure that you don't give any more deference to that testimony. But I think to some degree, jurors can't help but do that. And while that may diminish the character evidence, it certainly doesn't, if the jurors do view that wall of silence. I don't think in any way it affects what the state has proven and or the expert testimony.
And it looks like we may have lost you, Kirk. What I'd like to do is take the opportunity to listen to some testimony from one of the defense witnesses. Timothy Gannon, we know, was the police chief. He was the boss, of Kimberly Potter. He then resigned a few days after the incident. Let's listen to some of his testimony in speaking about the media.
You did an interview with the media on November 14th of 2021. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
And that was really about the aspect of, how you lost your job there at Brooklyn Center.
It was about the inner workings of working with the political ramifications of decision-making, yes.
And in that interview, you refused to discuss the actual killing of Mr. Wright because you thought you might be a witness in the case.
Correct.
What made you think on November 14th that you might be a witness in the case?
I had the belief that either the prosecution or the defense would call me as a witness in some capacity. I was a police chief.
And had the defense contacted you at that point?
I believe at that point they had contacted me.
Natasha, do you think it was reasonable for him to have thought and said at that time, I might be a witness in this case?
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable. I mean, he was the police chief, and so like he said, I mean, his department has had a lot of misconduct allegations. So I think that's pretty reasonable.
You know, the defense theme, and this started in the opening statements, the defense theme was it was a mistake, that Kimberly Potter, did not intend to pull her gun, that she did intend to use the taser. But then, as we know, the prosecution through witnesses ended up not really focusing on use of taser, but instead ended up saying through experts, neither one of them was appropriate. How much does that change what the jury has to decide? Well, I think it affects the jury instructions because the judge mentioned, I'm going to send some out to you all, but now that this is all out there, we're going to have some definitions of deadly force and reasonableness. So we're going to talk about that as well. But up next, I want to use both of your legal minds and your expertise in criminal defensive cases because we heard testimony of Dante Wright's parents, both at the beginning of the prosecution's case from the mother and at the very end of the prosecution's case from the father. Emotional testimony. We're going to break that down next here on Court TV Live.